What's going on, everybody? Sorry about the delay. I just had to wait for Streamlabs to update. I guess it decided that it absolutely had to do it now. So I'm finally here, and I am going to deliver. What's going on, everybody? Sorry about the delay.
Hold on.
What's going on, everybody? Sorry about the delay. There we go. All right. So speaking of delay, there's a heavy delay in my voice, so I can't have the windows open. But I am going to deliver on the promise of the title, and I think you'll be persuaded. It's really, really obvious. But as you know, sciences advance, and we have a more profound understanding of the universe, because this metaphysical stuff is really a reflection of these physical entities that we observe. They are moving in tandem, which is exactly the opposite of what most religious people and what most scientists expect. Of course, I think the most powerful and important element of this is the fact that scientific illuminism, or this approach to coming to a deeper understanding of the universe, the goal of it ultimately is to eradicate the religions. And the reality is that the truth will do that. The religions have been successful because they are thinly veiled distortions of the truth that was known to the adepts that created the religions. And it's really, really obvious once you're privy to a couple of little secrets and insights. The veil falls away and you're looking directly into the face of Isis, which is, of course, the objective of every magician, mystic, and spiritual seeker, whether they know it or not. What's going on, Northern Light? And so I was almost hesitant to do this live stream because I feel like this is, information that I should probably keep within my Illuminati, my patrons. And there are serious admonitions, when you take initiation in mystery schools, not to cast pearls before swine. And I'm not necessarily saying that you guys out there are swine, but it is true that there's really no point oftentimes in sharing the profound mystical secrets of the universe with people that are not really properly prepared. And so there's a lot of pressure, and I think there's wisdom in it to restrain yourself if you have pierced the veil and extracted this kind of knowledge. But I think that, the only thing that's going to liberate us at this point is the truth. And so, as Israel Regardie decided, 100 years ago or so, when he decided to publish the secret papers of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, I'm siding with him that it is correct, that it is time to, stop the secrecy. Which, by the way, is partly in place in order to protect people, because the only real way to come to any kind of meaningful knowledge is through your own internal processes. It can't really be handed to you because you're not going to understand it if the soil hasn't been properly prepared. But be that as it may, let's kind of cut to the chase and see if I can just kind of lay this out for you. It's partly predicated on the idea of the holographic universe that I've noticed is really popular. But basically, if you look at what all of the religions say about God, there are some cases where the God itself proclaims itself to be light. There are indications in the form of allegory throughout the Bible and a lot of the other religions. Jesus walking on water is light reflecting on the water. He's one of these characters that literally says, I am the light, right? And science has discovered or unveiled that photons are probably eternal. At the speed of light, there is no longer time or space. So when we talk about God as being this omnipresent, omniscient, eternal, unchanging presence that is pure, it's there even though it is, it's massless, but yet it has energy and presence. And all of these things are incredibly direct hints. It's pretty wild when you think about it. And it also, I think, it speaks volumes about our ability to keep our heads in the sand, to ignore the obvious. And, I think people like myself that have put all this together, it's not even that we're necessarily extraordinary or geniuses or anything of that, nature, of that ilk. It's just the lack of indoctrination. I really think that it's just not really that difficult to put all this together. It's really just the intensity of the indoctrination that has blinded people to these obvious truths. But so light is eternal, and it is unchanging. And if you are looking for a source of our consciousness, there's nowhere else to look. There really isn't, because all matter is light in a standing wave. All of the other forms of radiation in the universe are basically light, variations on a theme. So everything that exists in the universe is light. So it is omnipresent. It's literally everywhere. Even in the remote vacuums of space, there are still dispersed photons moving through the field. Right, and we're also going to talk about the as above, so below. I thought of another bit of, I guess, proof of the validity of that phrase the other day, and I don't know how I could have missed this, or that's what I'm getting at, you guys. This stuff is all so obvious that I really think that it's just a matter of indoctrination that keeps people from seeing it. It feels like a major accomplishment to put all these pieces together, but at the same time, it just seems so painfully obvious that it's almost embarrassing. And then, let's see, where are we at now? Okay, so the holographic nature of it all. You cannot grow an apricot tree from a watermelon seed. That tells us that if everything is made of light, the light contains everything in every photon. Because if it didn't, it would not have the ability to express the totality of creation, which is exactly what it's doing. So this idea that the all is in the all, I think that, if you contemplate that element of this, I guess it's not quite a proof, but that's the kind of logic that reveals these things. So, yeah, I mean, that's basically the gist of it. Our consciousness comes to us on the rays of the sun. It's, spoken of throughout all of the major religions. Some of them use the sun as a symbol, or they deify the sun and make it some kind of being. But the fundamental idea behind that is that the light is the spirit. The light is the essence of us. It is the unity that projects this, the many, and our individual consciousness, I think, is just a matter of, so you think of the field, right? The electromagnetic field, and this idea that this consciousness permeates everything. I think that in the field, it lacks coherence. But where we are, we have a ton of magnetite in our brain. And that is what gives the field enough coherence to allow sophisticated consciousness to exist. That is my story, and I'm sticking with it. Another interesting element of this, I think, that emerged in my mind the other day. I've given this analogy before of how as above, so below can be observed in the atom, because they say that if we were able to shrink down so that we're the same size relative to the nucleus as we are right now to the Earth, there would be about the same distance from where we are standing on the nucleus or where we are now to the moon. So it's like the numbers are the same, the scale is the same at every level, right? So I've also imagined that it could be true that in the same way that we talk about electrons going in and out of existence, basically, because they call it spin, but as I understand it, that's not really what it is. It's more like they're blinking in and out of existence, and we don't know where they go when they're not here. I've wondered, like, how do they know that it's the same particle, though, when it reappears? Do they tag its ear or something? I mean, how do they know it's not? I guess because energy can't just spontaneously create itself is one reason why they're, I don't know. But that is a question that I would like answered. Where are we at with this? Oh, yeah. So the blinking in and out of existence at that scale, right? If we shrunk down that small, I'm willing to bet that it would take about the lifetime of a star for those particles to blink in and out of existence, because the time scale would change. You know what I mean? And another reflection of that as above, so below idea, particles are almost a misnomer, because the way I understand it, it's more like there's a little bunch. Like if you took a rubber band and you say you use a blanket to represent the field, and then you bunch up a little bit of it and wrap it with a rubber band, so there's a little bunched up part, that's the particle, actually, right? And so on one level, we have these subatomic particles that are that. And then on another level, we have humans with all this magnetite in our head causing the field to bunch up and give us this sense of having a sophisticated consciousness. And then on yet another grander scale, we have the field of space and time with stars that represent the same exact energy doing the same exact thing on a tremendously larger scale than on the subatomic level. So, you know, as we approach the singularity, where, you know, we don't know exactly what form it's going to take, but there are, you know, a few ideas that seem to be sort of leading the pack. And that is that we will download our consciousness into a quantum computer. And this idea actually is crazier than it sounds, even, because I've suspected that might actually be how it started somehow. Something along those lines, you know, this idea of a simulation, which is also kind of supported by this idea that there's a 2D interdimensional projector that's actually projecting our existence on this plane that is coming to us from physics as well, which, you know, that seems like it kind of supports the simulation, which, by the way, doesn't answer any of the major questions, because if there's a simulation, who's running the simulation, who made them? You know what I mean? It doesn't, to me, that question is irrelevant, but some of these things kind of do suggest it. And there are a couple of elements that really support that idea. And one of them is that we don't really know what's going to happen when quantum computers are actually perfected. We have started storing DNA from computers in DNA. So the hybridization of DNA and, you know, computers has already occurred. So, you know, that's pretty wild to think about, the fact that our actual reality is made up of quantum particles. And, you know, we're already merging DNA with our technology. And I think we're going to really be surprised once this really ignites and all the catalysts are in play, how quickly the unimaginable will become recent history. we're entering into a phase of incredibly rapid evolution, and we're on the brink of self-destruction. So it's very biblical in the sense that the apocalypse actually means revelation. And so, it appears that the veils between the spiritual truths and the technological gateways into hidden realms, there are major revelations that are vectoring, and that is really, really going to push our experience along. But I did kind of go off track there. The other possibility that people seem to be really, that resonates with a lot of people is this idea that there's going to be a massive spiritual awakening, and that it's going to result in some sort of re-engineering of everything on Earth, and that there'll be this period of peace and prosperity. And I believed that for a lot of years, and I still am, hopeful that it's possible. But one of the things that I've learned in my studies of metaphysics and physics is that as long as this creation is predicated on the laws that it has to have been predicated on, there will always be equal parts of opposite energies of all kinds. And nothing will ever change that. It's not possible to change that. It's not the objective to change that. It is just an eternal condition of the plane of causality, or however you want to think about it. Maynard James Keenan from Tool actually stopped a show a few months ago to talk about this exact thing. So feels good to know that I'm on the same page as that guy, because he seems to know what he's doing. But yeah, I'm not really able to become too invested in that. It doesn't seem realistic. Nevertheless, I'm certainly willing to throw my hat in that ring because we have nothing better to do. And there are some reasons that I can think of to believe that at least we can improve how these things manifest. And that could be the secret to creating a more habitable and equitable planet for ourselves. That perhaps we can learn to direct these energies in a way that is more conscious and more aware and more supportive of life. So an absolutely pain-free utopia where your imagination manifests as fast as you can think, and all that sort of stuff that a lot of new age gurus want to promise, that's probably never going to happen. But can we improve our circumstances if we are able to dissolve the engineered perceptions and political indoctrination and all of those factors that sort of drive the chaostrophe? Absolutely. And I think that it is exactly the reason that they are putting so much effort right now into dividing people and confusing people and obscuring the truth and distracting people with wedge issues and encouraging volatility. That's the whole entire reason that the overlords are shaking the ant farm. It's a wonderful fact that ants, you can put red and black ants into an ant farm and they won't kill each other until you shake up the ant farm. All systems tend towards homeostasis, right? Which means balance and harmony. So if human societies are not doing that, you can bet that it's because somebody's shaking the ant farm. Everything in this universe is subject to the same natural laws. And anything that's acting out of sync with those laws is being directed by a conscious agent of free will. That's facts. And that's the importance of pursuing this kind of knowledge and understanding, you know. It is, like I said in the beginning of the stream, it is just so thinly veiled and obvious what the actual truth is. And of course, it's not the entire truth. You know, it doesn't answer a lot of questions entirely, even if it's correct that light is the source of our consciousness. And you have to admit, if you think about the Bible and go through, I am the light of this world and walking on water and, all of these other indications, even, some of the solar stuff, 3 days on the Southern Cross, the sun is in 3 days in the Southern Cross. The morning star reference, a lot of people say that that's Venus, but it's also the sun. What star rises in the morning? I think it's just painfully obvious what the actual truths are that lie behind these stories. And it also seems to me to be very, very obvious that when Albert Pike wrote in Morals and Dogma in the 1850s that man had truth and found error, that's actually true. It's literally true. I know I've talked about this recently, but there was a study at the University of Ottawa. I think it was definitely Canada, probably Ottawa. Pretty sure I'm remembering that correctly. Where they got, it's not exactly a picture. It's more like a quantum shadow. But it might as well be a picture of, 2 photons at the moment of entanglement. And it exactly makes a yin yang symbol, even down to the little white circle in the, black side and the little black circle in the white side. And that symbol, by the way, is another indication of this inability to actually transcend duality as long as we're in this dimension. But yeah, I think that things like that, are pretty solid evidence that we are able to access these truths down to a very high degree of specificity, if extremely irregularly, but it does happen. That, by the way, the fact that our consciousness is brought to us on rays of light. Also, the omniscience. I forgot to mention this about light, but at the quantum level, it's said that information is not lost. So everything that has ever happened is retained at the level of the photon. Omniscient, omnipresent. What is the other word? Omniscient, omnipresent. What's the other word? Omniscient, omnipresent, and there's another omni. Omniscient, omnipresent. What the hell is the other word? Somebody put it in the chat. I don't know if you mean Alexander Shulgin. It says Alexander Dolgin, but I know Alexander Shulgin. By the way, you guys, if you're just popping on here, the secret to the whole thing is light. in case you guys missed that, definitely if you go back and watch just the first few minutes of this, I think I got to the point pretty quickly. And it's a certainty. There's really no question about this. That's the amazing thing about it. Every description of God is a description of light itself. There is something else, though. This comes with a bit of a caveat. I went through a process of, pretty deep revelations and visions and the whole thing. And during that period, I had expanded capacities of consciousness that I have retained to an extent, but definitely nothing like during that period. And by the way, since then, I've discovered this is a pretty common experience. Jerry Garcia talked about it once in an interview with Magick magazine, with a K, of course. Never saw him ever reference this anywhere else either. It's pretty crazy. I think he knew that almost no one was going to read it. So, because it's such an obscure publication. Robert Anton Wilson talked about this process. And so it's kind of like this peak, and it can be really difficult for people because you never again attain to that level. It sounds like no one ever does. But during that process, I had certain revelations that I later found in, writings of occultists and mystics and stuff. And that really left an impression on me, that I had, these ideas, and then discovered that they were already, Albert Pike's book and Aleister Crowley's writings and all of these kind of people like that. And one of the central ideas was that what we call God actually isn't light, but it's absolute nothingness. And that's actually one of the big secrets behind the Book of Lies. And part of the logic there is that all manifested things are dependent upon the existence of their opposite. And people will say, that you need hate in order to understand love. But I would take it a step further, and so do many of these mystical systems, and say that you cannot have the one without the other, that they create each other. The opposites actually generate each other. And so thinking too much about that can definitely cause an existential crisis because it really can lead you to feel like, what in the hell is the point? But also in Albert Pike's book, by the way, that my patrons and I have been going through Degree 28, piece by piece for many months. I think we're going to finish this Sunday. So if you're not a patron, please join the Patreon. Please also hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Zelle and Patreon. Support has become more and more infrequent as the economy is completely tanking. So we definitely appreciate your support being demonetized. I rely entirely on my community to support the channel, so we really do appreciate it. But in Albert Pike's book, and if you don't know who he was the Grand Commander of the Southern Jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry at the time of the Civil War. And in that book, at one point, he takes on the perspective of God, right? He's writing as if he's speaking from the point of view of deity. And he says, the Phoenicians thought me light, but I am nothing. All caps and bold, nothing. And that kind of strikes me as true. And there are a lot of artists, like Bob Dylan has talked about this or hinted at it. The Buddha talked about it pretty explicitly, that nirvana, or the highest states of consciousness, are this absolute nothingness. I think I actually got there on DMT one time, and I know that some of you might be inclined to say, oh, well, you can't actually cheat. And actually the most famous Zen Buddhist that has lived in the last 100 years, unarguably the greatest master, tried LSD, and he said, I'm not going to say these aren't the secrets that these compounds give you, but it's like storming heaven and stealing secrets by violence. And the warning, what that really means is that if you attain to too much knowledge before you have wisdom, you're going to end up like Prometheus, or you're going to end up like Mickey Mouse in the Fantasia, where the brooms and the, you know what I mean? He tries to use his master's hat to get all his chores done, and he ends up almost killing himself. That's really the warning there. It's not that they don't take you to those. They absolutely do. People talk about this blinding white light when, you smoke 5-MeO DMT. That's nirvana. That's it. You're literally just taken there. And you just have to understand that there's a mechanistic basis behind everything. What's happening is the 5-MeO DMT is short-circuiting the reducing valve in your nervous system, and you're in the absolute ultimate reality for 5 minutes and you're back. But it's just as real as, 30 years of meditating in a cave. So yeah, I was there once. And it was really incredible that to realize, I realized, and the realization brought me out of it, of course, because any thought or any disturbance of it and it's over. But it was exactly as they described, just like eternal nothingness. There was no desire for anything to change. There was no perception of the passage of time. There was nothing there. It was just absolute nothingness. And so, the idea basically is that every reality is predicated on its opposite. So the ultimate reality that sustains the rest of creation is absolute nothingness. But as far as the active principle, the wave is the logos. The oscillation of the wave is what imparts symmetry and order to the primordial chaos, the soup of energy in the first place. The logos, the word, the vibrating wave. And it is that wave that gives rise to the light. It's kind of a chicken or the egg question. Like, is the photon the source of our consciousness, or is it the interaction of the photon with the wave that actually, with the field that creates consciousness? Because visible light is produced by that interaction, as I understand it. It's because, the photon is blazing through this field at the speed of light, and what you're seeing is kind of like a streak of sparks, sort of, loosely. So the idea is that nothingness became aware. And as Aleister Crowley put it, when nothingness became conscious, it made a bad bargain, because that is what created duality. As soon as there was an awareness and empty space, there was two things. And because it's all sort of reflections of an allegory or a metaphor, everything contains all of the original aspects. So if the first thing it had the duality, then everything that was replicated by means of reflection by it also is dualistic and contains duality. That's why you can say that everything contains its contradiction. That's why there's a little black dot in the white circle in the yin yang and a little white circle in the black side. Everything contains its contradiction. Men have some feminine characteristics. Women have some masculine characteristics. And of course, it's all on a spectrum. But it's absolutely true that everything contains its contradiction. Even the elements, in the sense of fire, water, air, earth. If you freeze water, it's earth of water. If you boil water and the steam, it goes into the air, it's air of water. You can cut with enough pressure with water, and then it's fire of water. Everything contains its contradiction, and the all is in the all. And what I'm really trying to impart to you with this is that it is through these types of observations, like once you have the seed of this technique of analyzing all the different properties and characteristics of the universe, you have the ability to extract real knowledge. You don't have to rely on books. You don't need a guru. Your dialogue is with the actual universe. Everyone's objective is to become their own shaman. You are the god of your world. This is all very Luciferian in essence, and I'm not Luciferian, because I don't worship anything, and I don't really even believe in objective spirits. When I've encountered spirits, they remind me of AI, right? Like they're not exactly not real, but they're lacking coherence, to an extent. And with ayahuasca and everything, I'm not saying that I've never gotten information from them that is astoundingly accurate. But I just don't think that way. I think of it in terms of universal mind, and there's basically an intelligence integrated into the substructure of the thing. But anyways, we should go back and talk about the light again and the idea of the Garden of Eden and what happened with good and evil, and what the light bearer actually is behind the myth. And it turns out that, properly understood, the demonization of Lucifer was the demonization of consciousness itself. That was the actual objective, because the mind works in a language of symbolism. And so the adepts that created these religions knew what they were doing. They knew how to engineer a myth so that it would have a certain effect on your consciousness and your perception of the world. That's one of the reasons there is so much contradiction in these systems. Because if you plant an idea in someone's head and it requires them to have cognitive dissonance in order to maintain the belief, if you challenge it, they'll react with fight or flight. And so once you have got these ideas firmly rooted, no one can really challenge them. The only way really is if they're given psychedelics and they're challenged then, because the brain becomes very neuroplastic. And so you're capable of changing your mind on a level that you're not capable of normally, especially if you're older. You know, as you get older, these things kind of set like concrete setting, only over decades instead of hours. But the real secret of this story, you remember how I was talking about when nothing became conscious, and it was the light. The light itself is what generated this awareness. The light bearer is the wave. So when people talk about how, you know, in the myth, it was actually that Lucifer played music. Here we are with the logos, the vibration. This was the vibration. God was the light. Lucifer was the wave. And so anything that does anything, right? Because if God is this absolute nothingness, it's eternal stillness. There's no changes. There's no blemish. There's no opposites. There's no dark. There's no lines. There's absolutely nothing. Anything that does anything other than nothing is rebelling against God. It does not necessarily mean that it's evil, except for the fact that this creation is predicated upon duality. So it is technically where evil was introduced to the equation. So the devil's bargain, the real question here, even Joni Mitchell sang about this in one of her songs. We are stardust, we are golden, we are caught in the devil's bargain, and we must get back to the garden. I don't know what the hell that was. I'm the only person in the room, and something over there just moved. But where were we at with this story? Okay, so the descent, the fall of the fallen angel, streaking from heaven like lightning, was just the wave creating matter. That's the descent into matter. That's the actual allegorical meaning behind the descent into matter. Eventually, those waves compounded on each other. They replicated by means of reflection. And eventually, you know, that's brought structure and form to the universe. So the reality, though, is that the deliberate intention of the people that made a demon out of that process were demonizing consciousness itself. And if you look at what they do in the present day, dumbing people down, separating people, but mostly, you know, they have demonized the real symbols of power. They have scared you away from studying the things that would be the most liberating and the most powerful. You know, that's why they've demonized the mysteries, because that is really a compendium, or those, I should say, is a compendium of all of the most important and powerful, liberating spiritual and occult knowledge that has been accrued by adepts over thousands of years, stored in one place. That's what Freemasonry really is. That's what the Illuminati really was. Had nothing to do with anything evil. I'm not saying there aren't bad apples, because there are bad apples everywhere. Everything contains its contradiction. You know, we're living in the real world. We're not in a comic book. So there's always something, you know. There's always a gray in the silver lining, right? Every silver lining has a touch of gray. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying they're perfect. But that's why, you know, and it always blows my mind that people don't question the alternative narratives, because those are the people that you need to distract and that you need to give misinformation to, right? So, you know, people wake up and they realize that they can't trust the mainstream narrative, but they don't realize that a lot of these other, you know, they're still mainstream narratives, these hugely popular, ubiquitous ideas, right? How do you know who actually started those rumors? You know, I can promise you, you haven't seen anything that actually constitutes proof. You know, except a bunch of like, quotes that are taken out of context, and yes, I know they're taken out of context because I've read all of the material that they were extracted from. I know what the context is, and it was people trying to tell you what I'm trying to tell you here. That okay, so yeah, we got to the musician, the vibrating wave, the light descended, crystallized into matter. And okay, so here's another element of it. What do you think the tree of knowledge of good and evil was in the garden? It opened their eyes and they knew as Elohim knew all of a sudden. What kind of plant does that? Well, my guess would be acacia mixed with Syrian rue, because that's what would have been available in that area. And again, this is another reason why the mysteries are demonized. People don't really put this together, but one of the conditions of initiation into the mysteries was that you had to preserve them exactly as they always have been. And the kykeon had some kind of psychoactive beverage in it. Freemasons are still buried with acacia, which is a leaf that contains DMT. Why do you think that is? Because the drink that actually conferred what's called the apoptye, the secret knowledge of the inner circle, was some kind of psychoactive beverage, and a lot of people have suggested that it was ergot fungus. But the reality is experimentation with ergot fungus, the possibility that they would have discovered that on accident is insanely low. Because if you just eat ergot or drink it without putting it through a very specific process, your limbs will rot off and you'll go insane. It's kind of like gangrene or mercury poisoning, which is incredible. Oh man, I never talked about the secrets of the pyramid and light either, man. That's completely crazy. No surprise at this point in this journey. But yeah, so ergot, not a very likely candidate at the end of the day. And acacia mixed with Syrian rue would have been available in both Egypt and the Mediterranean. So in both of the places where the mysteries really took root and spread from, those plants would have been widely available. And so ayahuasca, basically a desert version of ayahuasca, is the tree of knowledge of good and evil with almost certainty. And the people that wrote the Bible were elitist adepts, but they had fallen into the left-hand path, the Black Brothers, we call them. And in the White Lodges, they actually don't hate the Black Brothers, which surprises a lot of people. But it's because everyone understands that all of these things have a role to play or they wouldn't be here. They're all, even if they're terrible, they're still necessary constituent elements of the story and the universe. But yeah, they were demonizing these things in order to discourage people from pursuing them. The same reason they demonized the Illuminati, which the real goal, they were just trying to stop the banks. They were trying to break up the banks. They were trying to get rid of nations because they're without borders. How are you going to have war? And they were trying to get rid of religion. And so in 1933, the Christian right got wind of that, and they thought, get rid of religion. That's Satan. And that's where the whole reputation of the diabolical agenda came from. It's just smoke from the Christian fundamentalists that managed to take root. That's all it is. So, okay, so then the pyramids. I'm trying to catch up with the chat a little bit here, but it's awfully long tonight. The other thing that I wanted to mention about this universal mind and, the clues that that the light itself is basically omniscient. We do things that are actually governed by our subconscious. that contain messages and indications and clues, signs, symbols, hints, clues, the writings on the wall, and the rest is up to you. The pyramids, people generally know at this point that the latitude of the pyramids is exactly the speed of light. Egyptians did not measure speed in miles per hour. They did not use latitude. But the secrets of the mysteries from the king's chamber is light. That's the fundamental central secret of it all. And I know that the staunch materialist would say that I'm an idiot and that, to find meaning in that and think it's anything other than a coincidence is ridiculous. But I think the opposite is true. Disregarding something like that as coincidence is incredibly dumb. It's just being committed to, a narrative to the point where it doesn't matter what comes up. You're going to look it right in the face and dismiss it. It's really wild. But then there's another aspect of this. The diameter of the pyramid expresses this as well. And I just made a recent video where I show this. So not once, but twice the exact speed of light in the location and the dimensions. And so what I'm suggesting is that, no, that wasn't necessarily conscious on the part of the Egyptians, but it's not meaningless either. It seems like we're meant to perceive this stuff and that this intelligence left clues. And even on a more pragmatic level, it's possible to understand this without assigning intention even to some, preternatural intelligence. Because of the way the subconscious mind works and the fact that light is transtemporal, right? Because it doesn't have a temporal designation. The only time that the light is aware of is now. That's it. At the speed of light, there's no time, there's no space. So there is no temporal designation for time. And information is not lost at the quantum level. And time is also not linear. So if our consciousness comes from light, we have the capacity on some level to engineer circumstances like that have meaning, but not for another 5,000 years. So you can understand it even without invoking any sort of supernatural agency, which I think is important. Always to consider that, as the same kind of idea can be an avenue for understanding synchronicity, some higher order of symmetry that is present in all systems and across and through all systems. So when you have experiences where your internal being is totally in alignment with an external circumstance, it is because there is a higher order of symmetry that permeates everything. And to support that even further, if Jung was right, that it is individuation, which largely has to do with building a bridge between the conscious and the subconscious. That is that same concept, but in the mind. So, one side of the brain is the internal world and the other is the external world. And so when you create that relationship in your brain, you have the ability to perceive it in the external world. 1111, because we're talking about this, 11 viewers and 11 likes. Because, of course, again, that's a glyph of symmetry. Look at it, draw a line down the middle. You have 11 on each side. It's symmetry. So let's see. Is there anything else that I feel like I have to say about all of this stuff? It looks like it's been about an hour. By the way, you guys, do share these videos, please, with anyone that you think might enjoy them. I'm definitely shadow banned, so it's very difficult for me to grow my following. If you look at the fact that I have 9,000 subs and we get like 10 or 12 people at a time in here. What's up, Big C? Did all of these people subscribe because they don't want to watch my content? You know what I mean? It just doesn't. 10% of them have the bell notifications on, so 900 people get notified, and only 10 of them ever really. Like, it's not. There's no question about this at this point. So I really do appreciate your support, because I'm hanging in there, fighting the good fight, regardless of the. I can't beat the algorithm, and I know it. So, but I feel like this is really important. We're on the edge of really overriding a lot of the influences that have limited us, that have misdirected us, and that have occulted the truth from us. We are transcending it all in the present moment, and it is a miraculous thing to witness. And the implications of it all are very interesting. One of the biggest implications that I think would be really important to people is the fact that if the light is the source of consciousness and light is eternal, then we're probably also eternal. I suspect that the awareness at the photon level is not like ours, and probably very basic. But, this is probably where the idea of reincarnation comes from. I'm not so sure that I believe in it literally, but I do think that the fact that photons travel through this electromagnetic field, and that's where our consciousness comes from, that when they're organized into an individual perspective, they are bits and pieces of what have been other people. So, you will sort of be reincarnated. I guess I just kind of went in a logical circle. I guess I do believe in reincarnation. I'm just thinking about how it could happen technically, and I guess there's no reason not to believe it. Also, Leibniz's monad. I had this really weird experience where someone asked me what a monad was many, many years ago, and I had no idea, in the sense of having read it. And then just the other day, I found Leibniz's monads, a paper about it, and read it. And it's exactly what I said they were, and that's what I mean about, it seems like we do have access to this information. It's not consistent, but it definitely seems to happen. And his position was that the individual soul is basically a photon on a larger scale. So maybe he was correct. He was a very smart guy. He actually gave us the binary number system. Man, why do we have to have 16 people piling on here after? I almost feel like I should recap just so that you guys actually get to hear what it is that I'm proposing as the ultimate truth of what do I think about the source. Honestly, I think that these occultists and the visions that I had all those years ago are probably correct, that it's somehow absolute nothingness is the ultimate fountainhead. So contradictory, but that idea seems to work, as paradoxical and incomprehensible as it is. But what nothingness actually means, I think, is probably pretty difficult for us to really formulate. But there are some questions that I just don't know that we could really ever come up with an answer. Maybe visually, we might be able to receive a vision of it, but I don't know that actually explaining it in language could ever happen. So let's just assume that it's true, for the sake of argument, that nothingness became conscious, which is what it even says in the Bible, that basically it realized it was there, and that caused the I am, that's it. The eheye is the word in Hebrew. Eheye, right? This nothingness became conscious, and that's what caused the light. Or the light came, and that's what caused the consciousness. Chicken or the egg? I don't know. Also, we have this problem with the idea of linear time. if time is not linear, then when we talk about these processes, it's really just a way for us to understand it to the best of our ability. But if there is no time at the ultimate level, at the level of the ultimate reality, then process doesn't really make sense. Another interesting question about photons is that if they are eternal, have they always been there? I don't think so. I think, many, many years ago, I had this vision of how the universe was created, and it was before I had read any of this other stuff. And I thought of it as the starseed vision. And it was basically like this streak of light, which I realized was a photon, but there was only one. And it burst through the fabric of space-time, and that was how it started a new universe. And it was basically saying that every soul eventually will grow to be a sun. So that's why I called it the starseed. And then if that star is successful, when it implodes, it'll create a black hole. And that is basically where the gateway into this individual unit of consciousness, when it sprouts and becomes a god, that's where its universe is, through that black hole. But basically, as far as this universe is concerned, I saw this process of nothing becoming conscious, and then the replication by reflection, and all of this continues until all of the potentials have been fulfilled that are possible within the parameters that are dictated by the laws of the universe. And then it reaches a point where there's nothing else to create, and then it collapses back in on itself, and it happens again, because once all of that energy is compressed, that's what actually causes the Big Bang. Once it compresses to an incredibly tiny spot. I mean, think about how much force it would take to send all of these gigantic fucking things hurling through the universe at incredible speeds, and then the border of the universe is expanding faster than light. So how much force would it actually take to, catalyze a process like that? So all of this energy is compressed into the singularity, and then it expands again. Systole and diastole is the two phases of it, as Aleister Crowley described it. And now, of course, physicists call this idea quantum loop theory, which really blew my mind to hear that, there's a school of physicists now that are saying that this is what they think is happening. And it also is the reason for the symbolism of the phoenix. That's, it burns up and is renewed, and then it regenerates and starts over again. That's it. So I have said everything that I can say about this for now. I hope that, I lived up to the expectations I created in that title. I feel like it's a pretty solid case, that I made. So I appreciate all of you guys. Please join my Patreon and support us, and you get access to 5 years of secret material, secret streams, and patron-only videos, and pure nothingness, infinite potential energy. That's it. That's it somehow. So please do hit the like button. And I'm going to do the tripping jam again. Last time it was a bit uneven, because that's kind of what happens when you eat a ton of mushrooms and play music. But the idea is that during the improvisation, sometimes the greater mind takes over, and it happened a few times during that stream. You have to really pay attention, but you'll see. So I'm going to try to work on the tone and improve the guitar tone a little bit. And but the last one, the guitar solo in Althea, the outro solo, I'm actually really proud of that. That was a peak moment, I think. I didn't know it while it was happening, but that was a peak moment for sure. So I don't know exactly where in the last stream, if any of you guys want to go check that out. But yeah, I'm going to tune everything up, and I'm going to eat a much higher dose this time. So that'll probably be on Sunday. So We'll see you guys again soon. Thank you guys all so much. Please share my videos because it is only through grassroots. I saw the other day that people see my content from YouTube recommending it 3.6% of the time. The rest of it is from grassroots efforts. That's crazy. It's all people sharing it because YouTube has shadow banned me and does not really recommend my stuff very much. So thank you guys again, and I will see you soon.